Hello, can you guys hear me? Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to. All right. Good evening, everybody. If you can hear me clearly, please use the comment section to indicate so I'm sure that my technology is well set up. If you can hear me, please indicate in the comment section so we can kick off today's session. Guys. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Onyeneke. Thank you, Precious. Thank you, Blessing. Thank you, Treasure. Yeah. So keep the comments coming. I'm excited to be doing this session today. And today we're going to talk about the O-1A visa to the US. And so I would wait for a few more minutes to get other people to join the webinar, and then we can kick off. So once again, you're all welcome to Mundus Consult's monthly webinar, where we talk about immigration pathways to the US. I'm excited to be doing this with all of you. Please drop a comment in the YouTube comment section telling us where exactly you're joining us from. I'd love to get an idea of where majority of the people here are located. I guess it's lots of people here in Nigeria already. So I just want to get an idea of where we are. So I can see Lagos, I can see Ibadan, I can see Port Harcourt, I can see Omar here. Keep it coming, keep it coming. I can see Oyo State. So it looks like we have people from all over Nigeria. I can see Anambra, I can see Ibadan. Okay. Oh, okay. I can see Los Angeles. Oh, okay. That's good. Ibadan, Ogun State, Ilorin. All right, keep it coming. Once again, you're all welcome to the Mundus Consult webinar. I'm sure some of you saw our ad on, social media in the last 2 weeks, and you're here because you want to get insights and you want to understand, what exactly are we talking about? So what's this O-1A visa? What does it mean? What's the requirements? Am I eligible to apply? How long is it going to take me to apply? I know you have lots of questions, and in the next 45 minutes, I'm going to take my time to break down the O-1A visa process, step by step, exactly what you need to do to prepare yourself and to position yourself to get this visa. And I'm also going to share why this visa category is one of the best pathways to relocating to the US. Okay. All right. So we have 42 persons live on this chat, and I think it's a good time to start. Okay. So I'm going to start with a little bit of introduction. My name is Martin Owakwe, and I'm the MD of Mundus Consult. Mundus Consult is an immigration consulting firm. We are mostly focused on the US. So we do employment-based immigration pathways to the US, like the O-1A visa, the EB-1A visa, and the EB-2 NIW visa. All right. So I'm going to share my screen right now so we can walk through the slides that I already have. All right, so give me a minute to do that. All right, that's good. Please, can you confirm that you can see? If you can see my slides, please confirm so we can proceed. Yeah, I want to be sure that everybody here can see my slides. All right, thank you, Deborah. All right, so today's session is going to be on how to move to the USA today with the O-1A visa. And like I said, I'm sure a lot of you have questions, you have concerns, and I want to believe that by the end of this session, you would have most, if not all, of your questions and concerns answered and addressed. All right, so what exactly am I going to do today? So the first thing is to provide an honest picture of where Nigeria currently stands, as regards U.S. immigration. I'm sure a lot of you have heard a lot about all of the restrictions, the ban, the pause regarding immigration to the U.S. So I'm going to explain exactly what that situation is and where Nigeria stands. I'm also going to explain why the O-1A visa is your best or one of the strongest pathways to immigrating to the US. And I'm going to show you data from USCIS to back that up. USCIS is United States Citizens and Immigration Services, which is the organization, the government organization that administers immigration benefits in the US. And then I'm going to show you 4 ways or 4 routes that you can use to get your O-1A visa. I'm going to talk about the 8 criteria that qualifies you for the O-1A visa, and then a 90-day plan for how you can position yourself from today up until when you're eligible to apply for this visa. All right, so I'm going to go through my slides very quickly. So the first thing is that, this is something I'm sure most people here have, already know about, is that Nigeria is in the travel ban list, right? So it is one of the 20 countries in the world placed under partial suspension. So the partial suspension means not every visa category was banned. So all immigrant visa categories, meaning all green cards for Nigerians who are living in Nigeria, currently banned. So if you're in Nigeria, and not even Nigerians who live in Nigeria, Nigerians all over the world, if you have a Nigerian passport, you're not able to immigrate to the US due to the current travel ban, right? That was put in place on the 1st of January 2026. If you're going to apply for the B1, B2 visa, which is the visitor's visa, you're also going to get denied because that ban also covers B1, B2. The same thing with F and M student visa, which is mostly for people who want to study in the UK. And then the last one is the J exchange visitor visa for people who want to do internship in the US. So all of these visa categories are currently under the travel ban, right? All right. So the partial suspension means that there are other visa categories that are open for Nigerians to explore. And one of them is the O-1A or the O-1 Extraordinary Ability Visa, which is the focus of today's presentation. Okay. So the O-1 Extraordinary Ability Visa currently has no cap. So there's no restriction to the number of applicants or number of people that will be granted visa. Unlike the H-1B, there's no lottery. So the moment you apply and you're eligible, you get approved and you can file any day. So the O-1A is currently open and there's no restriction whatsoever regarding the immigration ban. The H-1B is also another visa category that is also currently on, but unlike the O-1A, you need to go through a lottery, and and then if you get selected in lottery, you can only the lottery only happens once in a year, so it's not it's not a visa category you can apply any time of the year, and of course you need a US employer for that. And then there's also the L1 intra-company transfer. If you're working for a company that has an office in the US, the office can transfer your employment from the Nigerian office to the US-based office. All right. So basically what we're saying is that the O-1A visa is a visa category that people are still applying for from Nigeria, and people are still getting approved. So makes it a desirable visa pathway for people who have extraordinary ability. And we're going to talk about extraordinary ability moving forward. All right. So the O-1A visa also is a non-immigrant visa. So visas to the US are broadly categorized into 2. So you have the immigrant visa and you have the non-immigrant visa. For the immigrant visa, you're getting a green card. So you're coming into the US as a permanent resident. For the non-immigrant visa, you're getting a temporary visa. So you're coming to the US to work or to study for a specific period of time. Okay. The O-1A is very similar to the EB-1A in terms of requirements. Both of them requires that you have extraordinary ability, but the main difference between the both of them is that with the O-1A, you're coming to the US to live and work and study for 3 years. And then after the 3 years, you can then renew every other year. Why the EB-1A is for those who want to come to the US as green card holders. Let's look at what the approval rates from the USCIS, the latest USCIS statistics says about approval rates. O-1A currently has an approval rate of 91%, compared to the EB-1A that has an approval rate of 47.5%. And this is from the Q1 2026 financial year data that was recently released by USCIS. So what it means is that you have almost twice as much chance of getting your O-1A approved than getting your EB-1A approved. Okay. So if you're looking for something more guaranteed, something that offers you a better path of moving to the US quickly, amidst the whole ban, then the O-1A is the best route for you. All right, so as I'm going through the presentation, if you have questions, comments, feel free to use the comment section to drop your questions, and I would come to that and provide feedback by the end of this session. All right. So how does it work? On a very high level, the first thing is you apply for your O-1A petition, and the application goes to USCIS, United States Citizen and Immigration Services. So you apply to USCIS for your O-1A petition. Once your O-1A petition gets approved, you go to the embassy in Lagos for your interview and to get your visa stamped. And after that, you move to the US to live and to work. Okay. So on a high level, that is what the process looks like. So you get an approval, you go for your interview, and then you move to the US. So what exactly is the O-1A visa, or the O-1 visa, actually? So the O-1 visa covers, think about 4 different visa categories. The first one is the O-1A. The O-1A is for people who are into sciences, education, business, and athletics, right? So someone like, for example, Messi is currently in the US on an O-1A visa. He has extraordinary ability in the field of athletics, soccer or football. The only thing you need to do is to show that you have extraordinary ability in that field. And we're going to talk about exactly how to show extraordinary ability in your field. So if you're a professor in a university, you have a business, startup founder, you have a career, a successful 9-to-5 career, you're a researcher, as long as you can show that you have achieved a lot substantially in your field, then you're able to go this route. The second route is the O-1B. The O-1B is for people who are into television, people who are into music, people who are into like creative arts. And very recently, we've been seeing a lot of like content creators, YouTubers, podcasters. As long as you can show traction, you have a YouTube show that's very popular, you have a podcast, everybody listens to, and you can document all of those things, then the O-1B is a good route for you. And then the O-2 and the O-3 are like dependents to the O-1 visa. So the O-1A visa, if you're married, you have kids, children, all of them can follow you as either O-2 or O-3. And like I said before, the visa is initially for just 3 years. And after 3 years, you can then extend it every year. All right. I'm sure some of you already hear me talk about extraordinary ability. And you're wondering, what exactly does that mean? Does it mean I need to be like exceptional? Just to be clear, you don't need to, win like a Nobel Peace Prize or a Nobel Prize in medicine or in any field of endeavor for you to be considered extraordinary ability, right? The USCIS or the US Congress has stipulated 8 evidentiary criteria that you would need to meet a minimum of 3 to be considered a person of extraordinary ability, right? So let me rephrase. There are 8 criteria that the US Congress has stipulated that you would need to meet a minimum of 3 out of those 8 to be considered a person of extraordinary ability. And we're going to talk about all 8 of them. And then, in the context of Nigeria, I can explain to you exactly how you can meet each of those criterion. Before we go into the criterion, it's also important that we explain exactly how we can get your O-1A visa, right? With your O-1A visa, you cannot petition for yourself, right? So meaning you are not the one applying for yourself. You are only the beneficiary of the petition. Let me rephrase. You're the one benefiting from the petition. You're not the one petitioning yourself for the petition. So there are 3 or 4 ways that you can get petitioned. The first one is to get a US employer, right? Meaning there's a company in the US that is willing to employ you. That's the first option. The second option, which is what a lot of people do, is that they start up a company or they register a company in the US, and then the company then sponsors them, right? So for people who are entrepreneurs, startup founders, business people, if you have your business already registered in the US, fantastic. If you don't have your business registered in the US, you can get that registered in the US, and then the US company then sponsors you. Technically, your own company sponsoring you for the O-1A visa. And then you have the US agent routes, and then you have the foreign employer via agent routes. For the foreign employer via agent routes, you have a company that is registered in Nigeria or in any other part of the world that is not the US. You only need to get an agent in the US who would then act as, who would then represent your foreign employer in the US. I'm going to go into some of these things in detail in the subsequent slides. So for the US employer sponsorship, pretty simple. You have a company in the US who has offered you employment. So you're going to fill a form I-129, and the company is going to sign that. They're the ones bringing you to the US, right? Usually like the best option because you already have a job, you have someone, you have something to do when you come to the US. And so if you're like, an engineer, you're a researcher, you're a healthcare person, if you're able to get a company to sponsor you, this is usually the best option, as long as the company is a US entity. So it's a registered US company. This is usually the best option. But I understand for most Nigerians, it is difficult to get a company in the US to employ you, especially if you are outside of the US, right? It is difficult for you to get a company because the thing is, for them to hire someone who is outside of the US, you need to have very specific skill sets that they are looking for and that they are not able to get from, people who are already in the US, okay? Which is why the next route is usually the best that I would recommend, which is what a lot of our clients usually do, which is that you own a US company. You have a company registered in your name in the US, which is something anybody can do from any part of the world. It's pretty simple, straightforward process. Depending on the state you want to get registered in. A lot of people like to register their businesses in Delaware. Just go online. There are lots of services that can help you get businesses registered. That is, if you don't have one registered already. It's something you can do in less than a week. Have a business registered in the US. Have your board of directors. Have a written employment between you and the company. And that's it. The company can then act as your sponsor when you apply for your O-1A visa. All right. I think I'm going to take a pause to answer a question that I can see in the comment section. So someone is asking if it's compulsory to interview in the O-1A visa. Yes, before you come to the US, you must interview. So for every visa category, there's no visa category that you can just come to the US without an interview. But the beautiful thing about the O-1A visa is that the heavy lifting happens during your O-1A petition phase, which is something that you have to submit to USCIS, right? You submit your petition to USCIS, and then it gets approved. For that phase, you don't need to attend an interview. It is when you not get the approval that you can then go to the embassy in Lagos for your interview, right? So the biggest hurdle to cross is to get the O-1A visa approved. The moment you get it approved, whatever happens in the embassy in Nigeria is usually, I call it an academic exercise, right? Because 9 out of 10, you're going to get approved, right? As long as you've been approved by USCIS, your petition will most likely get approved at the embassy, except you have maybe criminal record, you have maybe a bad immigration history, or something, something really serious that will make them deny your visa. But most people who get the approval from USCIS, ultimately gets their visa approved at the embassy. All right. Someone is asking, if someone has a business owner in the US who is ready to give work, how does one go about it? Yeah. So, like I said, as long as the company is registered in the US, the company can petition you for the O-1A visa. All right. So we're going to talk about that in details as we go along the slide. So keep your questions coming, and I would occasionally look at the comment sections and then answer whatever questions that you have. So the second route is you owning your own US company, and then the company sponsoring you to come to the US, which is a route that a lot of people, a lot of Nigerians follow. All right. So the third and the fourth routes is the agent's routes, where you have an agent, which is basically anybody who is in the US who can act as your agent, then petitions to USCIS on your behalf. For the agent routes, there are two main categories or two main routes towards agent sponsorship. The first one is the multi-client agent. So the multi-client agent is, if you're a consultant, you're a freelancer, you're a creative, and you're going to be dealing with like multiple organizations, and you don't want to be tied to a particular organization, you can make use of an agent, right? Like I said, an agent is anybody in the US. There's no restriction. It could be a friend, it could be a classmate. Anybody in the US can act as your agent, right? So what the agent does is that the person will now be the one to interface with all of the multiple engagements they're going to have in the US, right? Because for most freelancers, at every point in time, they have like multiple people they are working to get each and every one of them to petition on your behalf. So you have to represent all of your multiple engagements. And then the other route is if you have a foreign, meaning you have a company that is in Nigeria, because the company is not a US-based company, the company cannot sponsor your O-1A. So what you do is you get an agent in the US. The agent in the US will now represent your foreign company, in the US. So in your petition that you're submitting to USCIS, your agent will be the one to sign of your foreign company. So meaning on behalf of the company that employs you in Nigeria. All right. So let's talk about the 8 criteria that I talked about. So getting a petition in the US, or getting an agent, or getting an employer is the first, right? After passing through that phase, the next phase is where you now show that you meet 3 out of the 8 criteria. And we're going to talk about the 8 criterion one after the other. All right. So the easy ones, a lot of people can get awards. You need to show that in your field you've won awards, and those awards could be hackathons that you attended. It could be industry awards. It could be business awards. It could be national competitions that you went for and you won, right? So if you've won any form or kind of award in your field, that can help you qualify for this visa category. The second one is membership. If prestigious association where the for membership is outstanding achievements of its members, right? That means you can then use that to qualify for the O-1A. So means is that you can't just use any kind of membership. You can't say, because I'm a member of let's say National Association of Nigerian Students, I'm a member of Nigerian Medical Association, or I'm a member of Nigerian Bar Association. It is not enough to say I'm just a member of an association where anybody can register. It has to be an association where, for you to join the association, you need to show that you have outstanding achievements. So, for example, IEEE, for engineering and sciences, you must have heard about the IEEE, right? The IEEE have different levels of membership. They have the student membership, they have the professional membership, they have the senior membership, and then they have the fellow membership. The fellow membership is usually the highest level of membership. And there are lots of associations like that in Nigeria. When you have like a one-on-one consultation with us, part of what we're going to do is look at your profile, and then we are able to suggest like specific associations that you should be looking at joining if you want to be able to use or to meet this criterion. And the third one is published materials about you, right? If you're someone who has done things, you've done very notable things, in Nigeria and in your field of endeavor, most likely you will have media mentions of your work. So, someone has talked about your work on Vanguard, Daily Sun, Tribune. You've been invited to speak on a radio station, TV station, podcasts. You've been interviewed on a blog. As long as you can show that there have been publications about you and your work, right, on a reputable media platform or TV station or radio station or podcast, then you can use that to meet this criterion. And the fourth one is judging the work of others. Have you been invited to judge other people's work, to review people's proposal, in any form? For people who are into academia research, it's usually peer reviews, right? So have journals reached out to you in the past to review submissions from other people, to review abstracts, to review papers submitted by others, or for conferences? Have you been invited to chair a conference or to be on a panel, or was there like a hackathon where you were invited to act as a judge? So if you can provide documentation to show that you've been asked to review the work that other people have done, then you're able to meet this criterion. Right now, I've already talked about 4 criteria, and the requirement is for you to have a minimum of 3. So it could be any 3 out of the 8 criterion. So we talked about the first 4. These first 4, in my opinion, are usually like the easier or the easiest 4 criteria that you can get. Okay. And then the other 4, let's talk about the other 4 criterion, which are, a little bit harder to get than the initial 4. So original contribution. So original contribution is, have you done something? Have you introduced anything new to the body of knowledge? So let's say you're in the academia, or you're a lecturer, or you're a researcher. Have you done any groundbreaking novel research, right? Something that hasn't been done before. Have you written a book? Do you have a patent in your name? Do you have like a framework you came up with? Do you have like a methodology that you developed? Is that something new you can say, this is something that I pioneered in my field, in my industry, right? That other people have used, right? And one way to show this is to provide letters of recommendations from people who have actually used your work. Another thing is scholarly articles. So if you're someone who writes, someone who is into academia, and you're a lecturer, and you've written articles that are scholarly, then those articles could then form part of the exhibit that you need to meet this criterion. The 7th one is leading or critical role for distinguished organization. Basically, what it means is, have you worked for a distinguished or a reputable organization, right? So let's say a company that is listed on the stock exchange, a financial institution, like a big financial institution. Have you worked for a bank? Have you worked for like top 4 consulting firms? Have you worked for like a top university in Nigeria? Have you worked if you've worked for any reputable organization, an oil company, any company that has reputation in the industry, if you can show by providing your letter of employment or recommendation letter from your boss showing the work that you've done at a company, then you're able to meet that criterion. And then lastly, high salary. Can you show that what you're being paid as salary is higher than what other people in your field and in the same location with you gets paid? I'm going to give you a typical example. So let's say you're a software engineer at a bank, right? Let's say Bank A. Can you show that what you get paid as a software engineer in Bank A is higher than what most software engineers in other banks in Nigeria get paid? And it's very easy to find out. Go to glassdoor.com, search for the job title. So you can go to glassdoor.com and say software engineer salary in Lagos or in Abuja. You're going to see Glassdoor. Glassdoor is going to tell you what the average salary for software engineers in the financial sector is. And based on that, you can then determine if what you get paid is higher than that. If it's higher than that, congratulations, you're also able to meet an additional criterion. So when you look at all of these 8 criteria and you think you can meet 3, or there's a pathway to meeting 3 out of the 8 criteria, then I think you're in a very good place to explore or to consider this visa option. Let's talk about the process. Process like how long is it going to take, and what's the cost, right? Which question I'm sure a lot of people want to understand. Now, the bulk of the time or that you're going to spend on the O-1A visa is going to be spent trying to gather all of your documents, all of the documentations involved, trying to build a strategy around your petition, trying to gather all of the exhibits, all of the documents. Remember, for all of the criterion that we discussed before now, you need to provide tangible exhibits, documents. So it's not enough to say, oh, I've worked for XYZ company, I've done XYZ in the past. You need to provide documents to back it up. So providing those documents, email correspondence, go to your email, print out all the emails from your boss, email from when you were invited to speak at an event, you were invited to judge an event, all of those email, text messages, letters, you have to put every single thing together, right? So the bulk of your time will be spent gathering all of that. Once you have all of that and you submit your petition to USCIS, it takes 15 business days, which is about 3 weeks, to get a decision. Once you get a decision in 3 weeks, the next phase would be for you to schedule an interview at the embassy in Lagos and then go for your interview, right? Because the O-1A visa is not very popular, there is no backlog at all for this visa category, meaning that unlike the B1, B2 visa where you have to wait for like 6 months or 1 year to get an interview slot, right now you can get an interview slot in less than, in fact, as low as 2 weeks, right? And it's even faster now because of all the immigration ban. So people are no longer applying for B1, B2 visa. People are not applying for student visa anymore. So if you go to the embassy's website today to schedule an appointment, I'm very sure you would find an appointment date that is in the next 2 weeks, right? And then go for an interview, get your visa approved and your visa stamped, usually between 2 to 5 business days, and you're good to move to the US. Let's talk about the fees, right? So these are the fees you're going to pay, and these are like official government fees. The first fee you're going to pay is the fee for the Form I-129, right, which is the main fee. If you're going to sponsor yourself, or your company is going to sponsor you, your company is going to sponsor you, so you're an entrepreneur and you have a small business and the business is going to sponsor you, you're going to pay $530 for that. If a large company is sponsoring you, meaning a company that has more than 25 employees is going to sponsor you, then you're going to pay $1,055, right? Then you're going to pay something they call asylum program fee, which is a fee that almost everybody who applies to USCIS is going to pay. So it doesn't matter if you're applying for EB1, EB2, O-1A, everybody's going to pay the asylum fee, which is usually between $0 to $600, depending on your specific situation. And then there's the premium processing fee, which is if you want to get a decision in 15 business days, you need to pay the premium processing fee. Otherwise, your petition is going to take maybe 6 months, 8 months before you get a decision. So usually I advise most of our clients to go for premium processing so that in 15 business days, you have a decision and you can move to the US immediately. And that is going to cost you $2,965, right? And then once you have it approved and you want to go for your visa interview, you need to pay $205 for your visa interview, right? So all of these fees are strictly official fees that you have to pay to the US government. And all of these things can be independently verified. Every single thing, in fact, at the end of this session, I'm going to show you like where you can verify every single information that we've talked about here today. Everything is online, so do your own research, which is what I tell people. For immigration, it's important that you do your own research. Don't take anything people tell you hook, line, and sinker, right? Do your own research. Every single information that I've shared with you here today can be verified online, Okay. All right. So just to reiterate, the fees that I mentioned here are strictly the official legal fees, like the fees that you have to pay to USCIS, right? If you're going to help you with the process, I mean, Mundus Consult, if you're going to help you with the process, then you're going to pay us for our own service, which is something that we discuss when we have a one-on-one with you, like a one-on-one consultation. All right. And also with the O-1A visa, you can move with your entire family at the age of 21, and they are also unmarried spouse, right? And your children, when they come to the US, they can enroll in school in the US. But unfortunately, your spouse cannot work, right? So if you're married and you have your O-1 visa, your spouse can move with you to the US, but they cannot school or they cannot, sorry, they can school, but they cannot work while they are on O-1 dependent visa. All right. So, what are some of the mistakes that we see a lot of Nigerians make? Because we've been doing this for maybe three years right now. Counseling Nigerians, talking to Nigerians, and helping Nigerians apply. Nigerians and other African applicants from other African countries apply for their O-1A. Is that a lot of them wait till when they think that they are ready, right? And emphasis on ready. Is that there's no exact time. In fact, the best time to start the process is right now, right? The best time to start the process is right now. You don't have to wait till when you think you're qualified for you to apply. Because first thing you have to do is to identify the criteria that you think you can meet, and then work out a pathway to gathering all of the exhibit that you need, right? So you need to be very intentional about, hey, I think I like the scholarly article criterion and I think I can meet it, right? Okay, so what's the first step? The first step is we have to start writing. You need to start writing articles. You need to start, joining research groups. You need to, start publishing some of the things you've written in the past. There are people who even your final year thesis or your final year research work. A lot of people do research work. They have a paper they've written, but they were not able to publish it. Right? This might be an opportunity for you to say, okay, hey, let me dust up the documents or the paper that I wrote when I was in final year in school and try to get it published. Start reaching out to journals, and see, how many of them you can get published. So the best time to start is now, so that you can drop a roadmap for how you can gather all of the documentations and exhibit that you need to be ready in, let's say, 6 months or 12 months, depending on what you have. Another thing that you have to be conscious of is that for O-1A, part of the exhibits that you need is letters of recommendation, right? Letter of recommendation from, let's say, your boss or from experts in your field, right? So let's say you're a software engineer, can you get letters from like other software engineers, like experienced software engineers in your field, right? Now, when people get those letters, part of what we do is, if we work with you, is that we help you with like structuring the letter, the content of the letter, how you're going to write it. And the letters that you need for O-1A are not generic letters. They're not letters like where you say something like, so and so person is brilliant, is hardworking. Like, you need to specify exactly what the person has done. If you provide generic letters, USI is just going to flag it. They want to see specifics. What did you achieve? What's the impacts? Was it measured? Exactly how much did you save? How much did you make? They want to see numbers. They want to be able to quantify and to measure the impact of your work, right? Another thing too is for O-1A, they're looking at national acclaim, right? So national acclaim is, they want to see that something you did, has been cited or talked about, across the country, right? So being a local champion is not going to help you, right? So for example, I talked about being published in the media, right? So if you're published in, let's say, a church magazine or a university news bulletin, it's not as impactful as when you're published in, let's say, Vanguard or Daily Sun or Tribune. These are all like national platforms, right? So you need to show that whatever recognition you have or achievements or documentations you have, it's not just restricted to like a small state, a small organization, one employer. You want to show that you've done things across multiple employees, employers, or across multiple states, or multiple organizations, right? Another mistake that we see a lot of people do is when you start out with a company, let's say you want to register a company in the US, you want to make sure you have a board, right? You want to make sure you have a board because, like I said, the company is the one sponsoring you. So the company is the one signing all of your documents. Even though you own the company, you don't want to be the only person in the company. So the advice I give people is if you're going to open a company, make sure you have maybe at a minimum, you have 2 other persons join you in the company as either co-founders or join you as directors or as members of your board, just so you have a semblance of some, corporate governance. Okay. And then, when you're submitting your petition, if you're going to write a petition, because there are people who feel like, they can do the research themselves and they are confident enough to submit or to do the entire process themselves, which is not something that we preach against, is that you don't want to make your petition look like it's an investor deck. It's not a pitch deck. You're not pitching to investors, right? There are specific legal requirements. There are regulatory criteria that you have to meet one after the other. And you have to speak directly to the plain language requirements of those criteria, right? So if it says published material about you on major media, the materials have to be published, one, it has to mention your name, and it has to be on a major media platforms. Like you have to meet the specific requirements of the criteria, right? And then if you're going to go make use of consultants, make sure you're going with a consultant who is well knowledgeable about what it is that you want to do. Okay, so what is the roadmap for those who are interested? And before we close, I'm going to take some time to answer all of the questions. I can see a lot of questions in the comment section. Feel free to drop your questions, and be rest assured I'm going to answer every single one of them. So the first thing you're going to do is a book consultation, right? Because what I'm providing here is like general knowledge, general guidance, but I'm sure people have like your own different individual situation, peculiarities, and I won't be able to speak to like everybody's specific situation, which is why the consultation section is important, where I go through like your resume, your LinkedIn profile, all of the things you've achieved, and then we're able to draw a roadmap for how we can meet this visa or how you're able to get this visa. So the first thing is to schedule a consultation where we assess your case properly, and then we'll begin to gather and assemble all of the evidence and exhibits and documents that we need against each of the 8 criteria. And then we identify your petitioner route. Is it going to be an employer in the US? Is it going to be your own company, or do you want to make use of an agent? And then we can talk about, how do we get letters of recommendations, and how do we draft those letters of recommendation, right? If you're someone who feels like, oh, okay, I don't think I'm there yet, and maybe I need 1 year to plan, right? So the next 1 year, you can start thinking about, are there opportunities for me to act as a judge? Maybe, a judge at a hackathon. If I'm into academia, can I start actively looking out for opportunities to do peer review, or to act on, or to sit on appeal panels, or to sit on panels where you review grants, right? These are opportunities you have to be intentional about getting, right? And also not just getting, but documenting all of that. Because one of the challenges that we have, or one of the challenges a lot of people have when they reach out to me for consultation, reach out to the company for consultation, is that they've also done a lot of things in the past, but unfortunately they don't have exhibits, or they don't have any evidence for that, right? Your friend is organizing an event and he calls you on the phone, say, hey, hi Benita, can you come, speak at so and so events? Or can you come judge, this hackathon I'm organizing? And then you go and there's no paper trail, there's no documentation, there's no email, there's nothing to reference, right? So while you've done all of these things, there's actually nothing to prove, right? Because like I said, for every single claim you make, you need to provide actual exhibits or evidence to back it up, okay? So you want to start gathering documents, right? You want to make sure that every single thing you do is documented. Even at your place of work, you get a recommendation from your boss, from your manager, from the superior. You want to get them to document it and say, hey, I appreciate if you send this to me as an email. So you have an email, like a paper trail, something that you can make reference to, right? So make sure you want to start gathering all of those documents. So, start looking for how to get published on the media. Do you have contacts in like PR agencies that can start telling stories around some of the things that you've done? start pitching your work. You have to be very proactive about, getting the work you've done out there, right? This is not an opportunity. This is not a time for you to be modest about your achievement and say, hey, I'm a shy person. I'm introverted. I don't like blowing my trumpets. Like for this visa category, you will need to blow your trumpets, right? You need to know, you need to show very clearly that you have done a lot of things. Like you need to get, make sure you have like a portfolio, you have a LinkedIn profile, all of your experiences, work experiences, opportunities you've had. Everything has to be well documented. Start looking out for conferences where you can speak at, where you can do presentations at. Are there awards in your industry, that you can be nominated for? Any single thing to show that you're exceptional. You have to start positioning yourself in the next 12 months to be able to gather all of those documents. All right. So at this point, I would go ahead and answer some of the questions or all of the questions, if time permits, that we have in the comment section. All right. So feel free to drop your questions and I'll do justice to that. All right, so someone is asking, is it capital intensive to have a company in the US? No. For most states in the US, you can register your company for less than $400 in the US. So it is not capital intensive. Depending on the state, some states, you could even do it for as low as $200. So the thing is, different states in the US have like different costs and prices for getting your business registered. So do your research, figure out which states you want to get registered in. But a lot of people like to register a business in Delaware, which is like the most business, corporate friendly states in the US. So, and there are lots of services that can help you. Just go online and search for how to register a business in the US, and you would find lots of services that can help you do that. Someone is asking, can you assist me to get a company that can employ me in the US? Unfortunately, we can't do that. We can't help with company sponsorship. What we can help you do is, like, if you're an entrepreneur, you're a startup founder, and you want to start up a business in the US, we can help you with like the business registration process, getting your business registered and all. But if it's to get an employer to sponsor you, first thing first, it's really hard. That's the truth. It's going to be hard to get an employer, except you have an employer already, right? You're working for, let's say you're working remotely, or you're a freelancer and you have a company already in the US who you're working for, right? Or you have maybe a friend that owns a business in the US and is willing to hire you. Otherwise, it is difficult to get a company in the US to just hire you out of Nigeria, except you have specific skill set that they are looking for and they're not able to get in the US. Can the person who has an LLC in the US issue a petition for the O-1A visa? Of course, obviously, the person can do that, right? Henry is asking, I'm currently into tech. My company is registered in Nigeria. How can I get my company registered in the US? I think I already answered that. For people who already have companies in the US, in Nigeria, you have two options. One is to get an agent in the US, which could be anybody in the US who would act as your agent, and that agent will represent your foreign company. That means you don't have to register the business in the US, but you need a US-based agent. The second option is to then register that business in the US, which is something a lot of our clients have done. We have a lot of like entrepreneurs in Nigeria who, what they just do is they go ahead and register, a US, the US, register the company in the US, and then that company then sponsors them. Something that you can reach out to us and we can help you with the registration process. Otherwise, you can just go online and search for how to register a company in the US. It's pretty straightforward, and it's something that you can do in less than 24 hours. Franklin is asking, please, what are the required skills that can qualify someone to be accepted by this US company? So, it's really difficult because it depends on your skill sets and the specific, job title that you're looking at. So it's going to be different depending on your field of endeavor or field of expertise. So I can't speak, generally as to, what the required skill sets are. So Alfred is asking, I'm a chartered accountant in Nigeria, and how can I go about it? I'm sure this comment was made before I finished the presentation. So chartered accountant, it means that you have you have the skill sets that that you need to thrive in the US, and a skill set that is also desirable for lots of companies in the US. So one thing you can do is to start up your own practice, like your own accounting, small accounting firm, accounting business, get it registered in the US, and then on the basis of that, you can then petition yourself to the US. Chiefs and contemporaries asking, I've been denied USA visa with Trump as the current president. Do I have a chance? Yes. So being denied a US visa doesn't mean you can't get a visa approved. Like I mentioned before, this is like a, it's like it's separate visa category from, let's say, the business, the B1, B2 visa or the F1 visa. And the reason why I say it's special is because for most visas, for most non-immigrant visas in the US, you need to prove, one of the things you have to prove when you go for your interview is that you have home ties, right? And that you're going to return back to your country at the expiration of your visa. That's one of the things you have to prove. So when you go for the student visa interview, they will always ask you, what's your plan after school? What's your plan? And you would have to tell them how you intend to come back to Nigeria, because it's a non-immigrant visa and you're not supposed to have immigrant intents. You're not supposed to be an intending immigrant, right? The plan should be, I want to go to the US, study temporarily, and then come back. But for the O-1A visa, the O-1A visa is one of the few visa categories where you have what they call dual intents. So dual intent is, it is possible that my intention is to relocate to the US. It is possible that my intention is just to go work for 3 years and come back. So because of that, when you go for your interviews, they're not going to ask you, so tell me about your plans after school, after work, after 3 years, or can you prove to me that you have enough home ties to be able to bring you back to Nigeria? So what it means is that for the O-1A visa, the chances of getting denied is really, really low as against the B1, B2, or the student visa. The biggest hurdle you have to cross is getting your petition approved by USCIS. Once it gets approved by USCIS, you're almost 95 or 98% guaranteed of getting your visa approved at the embassy in Nigeria. So irrespective of your previous visa denial, except your initial visa was denied on the basis of maybe misrepresentation or fraud or anything serious. But otherwise, if it was denied based on, let's say, you're not able to prove enough home ties, then you can as well try with the O-1A route. Rian is asking, what advice will you give someone going for B1, B2 appointment in August? The truth is, right now, if you go for a B1, B2 interview in Lagos or Abuja, you're going to get denied, right? You're going to get denied because, like I said in the beginning of this session, the B1, B2 visa is part of the visa that has been banned by Trump for Nigerians. So you can still, they don't stop you from scheduling a visa interview. So you can schedule a visa interview, they give you a date, they invite you for interview, but be rest assured that you are going to get denied. So if you ask me, there's no need going for the interview, right? Because go for the interview, you have a denial in your name. So there's no need, except the ban gets lifted between now and your interview dates. Otherwise, it's just a waste of time, waste of money, and waste of efforts, right? I know I talk to Nigerians about this, people who have visa interviews, and they say, oh, my case is different. I've prayed, or my pastor said I should go ahead. I wish them the best. But so far, there is no single case of somebody whose visa, B1, B2 visa, has been approved by the US Embassy in Nigeria since January of this year. All of the people who have been traveling to the US are people who already have their visa approved before January 1st. So people who have their visa approved have been traveling, going in and out of the US, but people who have been going to the embassy for interviews since this year have all gotten their visas denied. I think I had the last question here is, this visa requires that we renew every 3 years. Is it a green card? No, it is not a green card. It's a non-immigrant visa. So what a lot of people do, the strategy a lot of people do is they come into the US with an O-1A visa. Since the O-1A visa is very similar to the EB-1A visa, they come to the US with an O-1A visa, and then while they're in the US, within that 3 years, then they now apply for the EB-1A visa, and on the basis of the EB-1A visa, then they apply for their green card, right? Unfortunately, you can't apply for your EB-1A visa from Nigeria right now because the EB-1A visa is an immigrant visa, and all immigrant visas are currently banned in Nigeria, right? So, which is why, like I said, the O-1A is a desirable path for people who want to relocate to the US amidst the Trump bans. So, you get an O-1A, come to the US, and then within that 3 years, you can then apply for your EB2 or EB1 or any other visa pathway that's available for you to be able to then get your green card. All right. So I think those are all of the questions that we have. If there are any more questions, we have 4 more minutes to the end of this session. If there are any more questions, I'm happy to answer that. Otherwise, reach out to us. Our email is office@mundusconsult.com, or send us a WhatsApp message using our phone number +234 706953775 to schedule a consultation with me where I would go through your profile, all of the things, all of the documents that you have, and then you're able to come up with a strategy and a roadmap for how you can qualify for this visa. All right. So thank you very much for, spending the last 55 minutes with me discussing the O-1A visa pathway. I wish everyone here who is interested in the US immigration the very best, and rest assured that Mundus Consults, we are more than happy to help you with this process. Thank you very much, and see you sometime next month. Have a good night rest.